Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 1,000 likes on this one. Dropping a like ensures more people see the content, but it also just lets me know I'm doing a good job. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this all of the time. Also, my next video will be a 10-hour special, so if you don't want to miss that, be sure to turn on post notifications. We're getting really close to my 2025 goal of 125,000 subscribers. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax. Enjoy this ad-free content right after the ad after this intro. There won't be any more ad breaks after that one. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. I've always believed certain places absorb energy. Not just haunted castles or graveyards, but places where a lot of people pass through. Airports, train stations, hotels. Especially hotel rooms. See, I used to work night security at one of the poshest hotels in Dublin City. 5 stars, marble floors, high-end clientele. That kind of place. You'd think nothing dark could touch it, but let me tell you, money doesn't stop the weird stuff from creeping in. It started around 2:17 a.m. I remember because I was mid-yawn, flipping through the camera feeds when the front desk patched a call through to security. A man's voice, panicked, breathless. "My wife's in the bath. I think she's not breathing." I snapped upright. Me and this other guard, Mark, rushed to room 237 on the 8th floor. The hallway was dead quiet. The kind of quiet that feels wrong, like the building itself is holding its breath. We pushed in. The guy was pacing around, soaked from the waist down. The bathroom door was wide open. I'll never unsee that moment. She was in the tub, completely still. Water up to her shoulders. Eyes open, but not seeing. We dragged her out, tried CPR. I was counting compressions under my breath while Mark gave breaths. Her skin was cold. Like, not just chilly. Cold. Like touching stone. I knew it was too late, but we had to try. Police arrived within minutes. The moment they stepped in, they told us to stop. One of the officers pulled me aside and said quietly, "She's been gone a while, a couple hours at least." The husband told them they'd argued earlier. He stormed out, came back, saw her in the bath, assumed she was just soaking and went to bed. Said he only got suspicious when she didn't join him. No obvious signs of violence. No water overflow. No witnesses. They couldn't charge him, but between us, staff, cops, even the paramedics, we all felt it. That gut pull. That something's off feeling. He checked out the next morning. Quiet, calm, not a single tear. Room 237 was locked off for 3 weeks. Housekeeping deep cleaned every inch. Management said, accidents happen, life moves on. They reopened the room like nothing happened. No priest, no sage, nothing. Just fresh linens and a new bar of soap. The first person to stay in that room after the death was this woman named Liz. She was a regular, corporate client. Stayed at least once a month. She always asked for a high-floor room. She got 237 without knowing anything. Next morning, 6:50 a.m. She's at the front desk with her suitcase and this look like she'd seen hell. I was walking past when she said, loud enough for guests to hear, "That room is haunted. I didn't sleep a second. Something's wrong with it." She said she kept hearing dripping water all night, not just from the bathroom, like it was coming from the walls. At 3 a.m., the taps in the bathtub turned on by themselves. Full blast. She walked in and turned them off, soaked her slippers. Then, 5 minutes later, the shower started. She swore she hadn't touched anything. She said she kept smelling something. Floral, like old roses but rotten. like death wearing perfume. We offered her another room. She refused, said she was checking out for good. Never came back. After that, room 237 got a reputation. Internally, guests kept requesting room changes after one night. Some didn't even last that long. There was this German businessman who called at 1:03 a.m., whispering like he didn't want someone to hear. "I think someone's in the bathroom." I asked if he saw anything. "No," he said, "but someone is coughing. A wet cough." I went up. Bathroom was empty, but the floor was damp. Towels crumpled in the corner. The toilet had been used, seat up. Water moving like it had just flushed. The guy hadn't gone in all night. He checked out the next morning without breakfast. A honeymoon couple stayed there once. The woman came down at 4:12 a.m. in her pajamas crying. She said she saw a pale woman standing at the foot of the bed, dripping wet, not moving, just staring. Her husband didn't see anything, but he confirmed the room temperature dropped 10 degrees in minutes. I checked the thermostat. It was set to 23 degrees Celsius. The room was at 14. No windows were open. I started dreading that room. Even walking past it gave me this tightness in my chest, like I was being watched. I'd make rounds and literally speed walk past it. Once I was reviewing CCTV around 2:20 a.m., same time the original call had come in, and I saw something weird. The hallway camera outside 237 glitched, just for a second, but when I paused the footage and zoomed in, there was a shadow, not a person, a shape, just outside the door, like someone was standing there pressed against it. I replayed it 100 times. Mark saw it too. "It's probably compression error," he said, but his voice shook when he said it. Management refused to shut the room. They said we'd get sued if we told guests. Unless you see something tangible, it's superstition. So we kept assigning the room, but we started calling it the bathtub room behind closed doors. The cleaners hated it. They'd go in pairs. Even when nothing moved, the mirror always fogged up on its own. Once, one of the maids, Rosa, swore she saw the words, "Don't leave me," written in the steam. But when she called her coworker over, it vanished. Guests who stayed more than one night always complained of water sounds. Dripping, running, gurgling, sometimes crying. One guy swore his sheets were damp every morning, like someone had gotten in the bed wet. Then came the worst night, 3:08 a.m. We get a call from room 237. The guest was an old man, solo traveler, very logical, very composed. He said, "Someone knocked on my bathroom door from the inside. Not once, 3 times. I sprinted up. When I opened the door, the room was empty, but the lights in the bathroom were flickering. Not just flickering, buzzing. And the bathtub faucet was trickling, just enough to hear. That's when I noticed it. There was water, not just in the tub. It was on the floor, in a straight line like footprints, leading from the bath to the bed. But no one had walked in. No one had opened the door. I put in my resignation a week later. Mark lasted a month more. He said he heard a woman humming in the elevator when he was alone. Hummed the same tune for 3 floors. When the doors opened, no one was there. Room 237 is still open as far as I know. They just keep painting over the mold and turning the mattress. But something lives there now. Or maybe something never left. Not every hotel room starts off haunted. Some of them become haunted. And I was there when it happened. My stepmother hated me, despised me. She never said it, but hate exuded from her every expression. The scowl was immediate, a juxtaposition between disgust and hate. Strangers, even those most suspect of character, evoked nothing but kindness from her, but from me there was nothing but disdain. She hated me, and I hated her. My father had died a few years back, a sudden heart attack, a man seemingly healthy but always a minute from death. My father drank and smoked but was active and full of vigor. His death was both expected and unexpected. I knew his lifestyle was unhealthy and dangerous, but naively, I also believed he was genetically superior to the rest of the human race. He was destined to live well into his 90s with a shriveled liver and a stubborn determination to persist beyond the expectations of human physiology. To me, he was a superhero, flawed but celestial, a man who embodied greatness. He spoke his mind. He feared no one. He was the quintessential alpha male. Then he died, while crapping in the toilet, his pants down around his ankles, and his head buried in his own exposed crotch. When God humbles, he doesn't half-ass it. He doles out the humiliation in full measure. My dad loved Blue Hole Lake. He talked of it constantly. His family went there every year. His father and his father before him. Every August and every summer from the first time the lake was formed until my father ended the tradition. He never took me to the lake or the cabin he so fondly remembered. After he died, I vowed to return to the lake and reinstitute the long-neglected family tradition. Why didn't he take me? Why didn't he want to do with me what his father had done with him? Honestly, it hurt me. I put together the trip, the vacation request approved, a rare concession from my boss. I planned it for August. Well in keeping with family tradition, I honored every detail, every little nuanced description my dad willingly conveyed. I say willingly because there was a glaring omission in his fond recollections. He always stated that they stayed in the same cabin, but he never said what cabin it was, the number, or any description. He would stop and stare into his own mind, steadfastly removed from the present, cast into a painful memory, his strength visibly drained. August was hot and unforgiving. The dark water splashed and rolled towards the beach. It was inviting and intimidating. I had rented a one-room, musty cabin. I got there late on Monday evening. I was going to unpack and read myself to sleep. It was too late to have much time for swimming, but a force pushed me to do otherwise. There was a need, a compulsion to swim, an invitation to dive into the ambiance of nature. I changed into my swim trunks and headed down to the lake. There was about an hour or so until the beach was closed. It's closed at sunset, whenever or whatever that meant. I suspected sundown was less about the sun and more about the whims of an impatient park ranger ready to end the day. I walked slowly into the water. The warmth was uncomfortable. I expected a chill, but it felt more like dirty bath water, shocking and disappointing. The heat of the water was suffocating. There was an unremitting discomfort. The beach was empty and bare. I swam to the orange barrier, the line between safety and danger. Beyond the other side was an unimaginable depth, or maybe just the recognition that this was the distance of no return. No coming back from the edge of eternity. I put my arms up and rested my back against the float, looking up towards the beach. The last of the patrons was leaving, drying off and packing up his belongings. I was the only one left. At the top of the beach I could see the parking lot, and beyond that, a patch of forest. A slender brunette in a two-piece yellow bathing suit strolled out of the forest. She carried nothing, no bag, no towel, nothing but a pompous swagger. The closer she got, the more her beauty came into focus. Everything about her was steeped in a previous era. Her bathing suit reminded me of the woman I saw in black and white movies. Her hair was of an elegant movie star, short and curled in the back. She entered the water with no reservations, boldly plunging up to her chest. She slowly turned her head to acknowledge my presence and held me in her gaze. I felt exposed and pinned down, unable to cast my eyes elsewhere. She seemed significantly closer to where I was than where she had originally entered the lake. It was a transition, as if in a dream, a recollection from one point in space to another point in space with absolutely no movement. Then she submerged under the surface and disappeared. She was under longer than any human possibly could be without suffocating. Minutes passed. Time dragged. I surveyed the lake, looking in a panoramic frenzy, feeling uncomfortably close to death. She was nowhere to be seen. I feared she had drowned, gotten wrapped up in a litter of sunken debris, or her foot caught in some unintentional trap. And then, right in front of me, she emerged from the water, her eyes pale blue, without iris or pupil, marbled with streaks of red. She smiled and etched in black. On 3 of her top incisors were the numbers 3, 1, 4. She held her smile in a long, bizarre pose. The water was too deep to stand, and yet she didn't attempt to tread water. She didn't thrash about. She simply floated, perfectly still, not even affected by the wake of a passing speedboat. She wasn't subject to the laws of nature. The water obeyed her. The warm water cooled rapidly. My teeth chattered uncontrollably, my trembling breath visible in the gray air. The sun was diving fast into the deep horizon. She slowly vanished, still flashing that hideous smile with that cryptic message scrawled across her teeth. Her icy hand grabbed my ankle and pulled me under. The plunge was unexpected. I was unprepared. Water rushed through my nostrils and mouth as I breathed in, foolishly trying to scream for help. I kicked and thrashed my arms upward, trying desperately to break free. I felt her release my ankle. I shot up through the depths, further down than I had anticipated. Dim light, beautiful twinkling points of grace beckoned through the water. Freedom was close at hand, but as my hand broke the surface, she grabbed my ankle and yanked me even deeper. I heard her cruel, muffled laughter. My lungs were on fire. It was as if I had swallowed hot, thick oil. Pressure coursed through my veins. I felt the pounding of my rapidly beating heart in the temples of my head. A dizzying array of stars swam before my eyes. I then saw her floating before me, her skin blue and tattered, eaten and rotted by the forces of nature. Death was consuming her, and yet, though barely visible, I saw her smiling. 314 flashed across my mind. I realized I was free from her grasp. I shot up to the surface. Oxygen extinguished the fire in my lungs. I coughed and heaved up filthy, bloody water. The coughing was uncontrollably, but so was the instinct for survival. I thrashed and coughed and coughed and thrashed. My arms were rubber, hands and feet number. I barely felt the water, but as soon as my foot touched the bottom, the sensation of sand stung my feet into action. I made my way to the shore in a clumsy combination of swimming and running, a dance of hysterics, the play between weakness and a determination to survive. I was a wounded gazelle with one last chance, a dash through the thorny shrub, but to no avail. I felt the familiar grip on my ankle. She dragged me back into the water. I turned to kick, the water shallow enough to allow free movement of my limbs. The heel of my foot glimpsed the side of her bicep. The skin was loose and sloughed off her arm. Her body had deteriorated to an even worse degree. She was a walking, waterlogged corpse. One of her eyes was missing and the other was decayed and collapsed. Chunks of flesh were gone, chewed or decayed. Her hair was no longer elegant. What was left of it was thin and stringy. Through all of it, though, she never ceased to smile. 314. I was now fully on my back. I tried to kick again, but at the moment I went to thrust my foot forward, my whole body went limp. I was paralyzed. I lay in the shallow water, looking into the darkening sky. The water was lapping against my ears and splashing into my eyes. I felt her climb on top of my legs. Crawling her way slowly up my body, she lifted her abominable face from my chest, grasped her bony hands around my shoulders and heaved herself forward. Her face was in my face, her one good eye dripping down her cheek. The stench was vomit-inducing. I swallowed, choked, and gasped for air. "Charlie," she whispered. Charlie. That was my father's name. Charlie. "I'm not Charlie." She grabbed my head and planted her dead lips on mine. Bile and decay filled my mouth. It wasn't a loving embrace. Her mouth held tight. Putrid water flowed from her inner being into my throat. I felt like I was trapped in a dentist's chair with dirty cotton stuck in my mouth, and rigid plastic stretching my lips wide. A vision played before my mind. A beautiful woman in a two-piece yellow bathing suit with elegant hair, talking to a man eerily similar to my father but much younger. A child on the floor. An argument. The man choking the woman. Lifeless. The man leaving with the child. Cool air rushed across my body. I heard a splash and a scream. I could feel my arms and legs again. I crawled to my knees, stood up, and was about to run when I heard her whisper from behind me. "Son." I stopped and turned. My feet were still in the water. The warmth from earlier returned. Fear subsided, but sadness engulfed me. The woman was beautiful again, but she was no longer smiling. She seemed ashamed. The last light faded and her shadow dissolved into the merging line between sky and water. I had every intention of leaving that night, but I was exhausted. Sometimes fear plays itself out. You can only be haunted by ghosts for so long before it becomes routine, part of life. Besides, something had changed. That morning, I packed and got ready to leave. I had 3 days left on my reservation, but needless to say, I wasn't really in the mood to be by the lake. I did my last check of the cabin to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything. It's a ridiculous routine. I check under the bed, in the drawers, and even in the shower, in case I forgot some soap or shampoo. There was an empty carton of orange juice in the refrigerator. It wasn't mine, but I didn't want the next tenant to think it was me, as if they would go through the trouble to find out which guy had left trash in the refrigerator. As I walked out to the garbage can near the road, I noticed the cabin across the street. The little wooden sign staked out in front of the porch had etched in it the numbers 314. That was last August. Now a new August is fast approaching and I've made reservations. This time, I've invited my stepmother. The phone was in the glove compartment of my car. I hadn't opened it in ages. I never kept anything important in there, but now that I was finally cleaning out my ride, I found it. It looked exactly like mine, not just the same model. The screen crack was in the same place as on mine. The case matched perfectly, and even that fingerprint sensor was just as unreliable. This phone was identical to mine, except mine was in my pocket. So whose phone was this? I unlocked it. Same passcode as mine, same apps. Even the social media accounts were logged in, as me. Only one thing was different. A new app on the home screen labeled, "For Oliver." That message was clearly meant for me, and I don't know why, but it made the whole thing feel even creepier. What was even stranger, when I opened the app, it didn't show anything except a countdown timer. 34 hours, 11 minutes, and 55 seconds. It kept ticking down, but what the hell was it counting toward? I didn't know what to make of it. I just tossed it back into the glove compartment. I didn't have time for this. I had a date tomorrow, finally, after so long. I had to get ready. The date went well. We had dinner at a restaurant, then took a walk, and since I figured it was the polite thing to do, I offered to drive her home. But the moment we got into the car, I heard a strange sound, like someone crying softly in the background. The girl looked at me and said she thought it was coming from the glove compartment. I could see it on her face that she thought something was off. I opened the glove box quickly. The phone was there, the copy. It was vibrating and the app labeled "For Oliver" was lighting up. Its ringtone? A choked, agonizing sound like a woman sobbing in pain. Before I could say a word, she jumped out of the car and hurried off. Perfect. Now, thanks to this phone, I probably look like some lunatic. I figured it was best not to chase after her. First date, after all. Didn't want her calling the cops on me for harassment or whatever. The phone wouldn't stop. The crying looped again and again until I finally unlocked it. As soon as I did, the app launched on its own, the one addressed to me, and finally it went silent. The app looked like a photo gallery, but each album was locked with a timer, every single one counting down, except for the first. That one simply said, "Unlocked." I stared at the screen confused. What the hell is this? Then, though, I wish I hadn't. I opened the album. At first, there were just 3 images of a building, then a door, then an empty room, then another door, and finally the inside of that room too. The last few photos froze me in place. A bound woman lay on the floor, mutilated. Her head was missing. Various objects were stabbed into her torso. The floor and walls were soaked in blood. Total massacre. Grotesque. Surreal. Like I'd stumbled into the middle of a horror movie. Without thinking, I jumped out of the car and hurled the phone as far as I could. I never wanted to see it again. I just went home. That was enough for one night. It was Saturday, so I slept in. Finally, some much-needed rest. Though those images still haunted me. What kind of sick thing was this anyway? Groggy and half asleep, I stumbled into the kitchen to make breakfast and coffee, but my heart skipped a beat the moment I saw the table. A phone was lying in the middle of the kitchen table, but it couldn't be mine. Mine was still in my hand. It was that copy again. Same appearance, same every little detail. And yes, that cursed app was still on it. Full of folders. One album had already been unlocked. The next? Still locked for another 13 hours, 14 minutes, and 48 seconds. I had zero interest in seeing whatever horror it was counting down to. I grabbed the phone, opened the window, and was this close to throwing it out from my 5th floor apartment. Surely it wouldn't find its way back from there. But then, one thought made me stop. The phone was logged in everywhere, to all my accounts. Even my banking app was open. If someone found it and looked through it, I'd be screwed. I figured the safest move was to wipe everything, so I reset it to factory settings. Finally, everything was gone. Or so I thought. The rest of my day passed quietly. I went grocery shopping, cooked, then played some video games. A typical Saturday routine. I was just putting away the leftovers when my heart nearly gave out. Someone was screaming, agonized, tortured wailing. I had no idea where the sound was coming from until I saw it again. That phone, lying on the kitchen counter. It was flashing, buzzing, and the app was activated again. This time it was a man's screams coming through, and it wouldn't stop until I opened the gallery. Once again it started with a house, an old, crumbling building, but not the same one as before. I didn't care. I wasn't going to look. I wasn't going to let this thing force me to witness another horror. I closed the gallery, set the phone down, and stood up. But it sprang back to life, beeping, buzzing, shrieking, and the screaming grew even louder this time. Panicked, I snatched it up again. Same app. Was this for real? Did I actually have to look at the images, or it wouldn't stop? I gave in. I looked. This time it was a man, naked, gutted. His face had been peeled off. All his fingers were missing. Chills crawled down my spine, not just from what I was seeing, but from the terrifying thought that someone intended these photos specifically for me. At least the screaming stopped. I simply couldn't fall asleep. Those images haunted me. What the hell was this? What kind of sick nightmare was I in? By nightfall, I'd had enough. I grabbed the phone, smashed it to pieces with a hammer, and dropped it in a glass of water. It's not going to screw with me anymore. But when I opened my eyes the next morning, there it was, lying on my nightstand, perfectly intact, right next to my real phone. Same model, same look, exactly like mine. I didn't have much planned for Sunday. I just wanted to rest. I had just started my daily routine when I heard a voice. A man's voice. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was desperate, pleading, suffering, wailing. It was that phone again, sitting on the little table beside my bed, screaming. I tried to turn down the volume, but nothing worked. The only thing I could do was open the app. Another album had unlocked. The new image set started with a building, and I recognized it. That place was near my workplace. A burned-out, abandoned apartment block no one had touched in years. I scrolled further, and there he was, a man tied to a chair. His tongue had been cut out, his eyes gouged. A screwdriver was jammed down his throat. It was a horrific sight, but what really shocked me? That man was my boss. Sunday afternoon, I had to calm down. I was completely panicked. I dropped by Robert's place. He's an old friend. I needed to talk to someone about the phone and the pictures, but when I tried to show him, the app wouldn't open. We tried everything. He looked at it by himself. I unlocked it and handed it to him. We looked together. I even tried showing it to him through a mirror. But the moment Robert could see the screen, the app just didn't work. I didn't dare throw the phone away. It had just come back. Or worse, it had opened for someone else and I'd get blamed for all of it. I even tried calling my boss. He didn't pick up. I don't think I've ever felt this kind of gut-wrenching anxiety in my life. Robert works night shifts as a sysadmin, so he had to leave for work. I drove home alone. Nothing weird happened on the way back. I reached the elevator at the same time as my downstairs neighbor, a kind middle-aged woman and her dog. They were just coming back from an evening walk. We chatted a bit in the elevator, and then a woman's voice echoed out, wet, choking, guttural, like someone trying to scream while drowning. It was loud. The phone in my pocket buzzed and flashed. The woman didn't say anything else, just got off on her floor. I wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. I was so embarrassed. When I got home, I quickly scrolled through the pictures. Didn't even want to look. Just another victim. A tortured woman. Before going to bed, I scrolled a bit on my real phone. As for the copy, I threw it in the toilet and flushed it. I'd had enough. Lying in bed, I kept reading the news, and that's when I saw the article. A brutal murder happened right here in the city. The building looked familiar. It was the first photo from the phone, the first murder scene. The next day was Monday. Work was hell. Bob, my boss, didn't show up. No one knew where he was. And me? I felt like death. Nausea, dizziness, cold sweats, and the crushing feeling that everyone around me somehow knew what I knew. That I'd seen what happened to Bob. I kept thinking about going to the police, handing in the phone. But what then? They'd blame me for everything. They'd think I was crazy, especially if I couldn't even show them the pictures. That afternoon I went home, said I was sick. I just couldn't stay at the office, but one thought kept echoing in my head. I'll go to the next location. I'll see what's there. That same afternoon I bought pepper spray and a stun gun. I had to be ready. I needed to find some kind of clue, figure out who's behind this, or what the hell this phone even is. The app said the next album would unlock after that evening. 6 hours, 42 minutes, and 22 seconds. I was already on my way. The photos showed a factory building. I didn't recognize it, but Google's reverse image search helped. It was an abandoned industrial site on the edge of town. I was speeding toward it like a man on a mission. I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this destroy me, and I had a plan. When I arrived, I saw it immediately. A light on in one of the upstairs offices of the factory. Someone was in there. That was the sign. I pulled out my phone and called the police. Told them a murder was happening. If anything happened to me, at least they'd know where to look. Getting inside was easy. One of the chain doors had already been busted open. In the courtyard, a gray van had parked. This was it. The killer was here. This could finally be over. My hands were slick with sweat, but I counted on the element of surprise. I couldn't take seeing another corpse on that cursed phone. I stood outside the door. Light leaked from underneath it. Strange sounds drifted out. A mix of gurgling, groaning, and whispering. I readied the stun gun and kicked the door open. The room looked empty, but in the far corner something was hidden beneath a large tarp. A standing lamp cast harsh light across it. I ran over and yanked the tarp down. The sight paralyzed me. 2 women lay on the floor tied together. Their bodies were mutilated, their insides torn out. They'd been gutted like animals. And next to them, a man crouched low, eating the organs straight off the ground raw. I couldn't move. My mind went blank. The man looked up slowly, and I saw my own face staring back at me. Bloodied, twisted, but it was me. I was the one crouching there. I was the one eating them. Me. I couldn't move. He stood up, kept staring at me, and then he smiled. A grotesque, smug grin, so proud, so cruel. "It'll be a lot easier like this," he said, blood dripping from his mouth. Then he turned and bolted through the back door, fast as a cheetah. Gone. And I just stood there frozen in place, my feet glued to the floor. Through the window, the red and blue flash of police lights began to flicker in. They had arrived. But my double was already gone. Forgive me, I'm so tired. My skin is crawling all over. As I lay here, laptop on my chest, I can't find the energy to do anything but write. So write I will. I signed the lease in late May after acquiring my new job. It was an austere brick building with a dingy tile-floored lobby. lit by yellow bulbs that maintenance never seemed to replace. A single palm plant sat beside an ancient elevator system, which screeched like 100 nails on chalkboards each time it opened. A perpetual puddle decorated the corner by the double glass doors. From pipe leakage or rain, I did not know. Rent was cheap. It was perfect. Move-in only took half a day. I don't own much. The mattress was the most arduous task. A heavy rain began just as I was sliding it out of the van. I hadn't thought to bring a plastic cover. I was considering the potential damage of dragging fabric across wet asphalt when a man cleared his throat behind me. "Looks like you could use some help." I turned to see an incredibly tall and broad man. He was dressed in a stretched white tank top and paint-stained cargo shorts. Maybe late 40s. Older than me, I guessed anyhow, based on his thin graying hair, which was aggressively slicked back with some kind of product. He had shiny black eyes and a wiry mustache styled into mutton chops, giving him the appearance of a retired pro wrestler. His teeth were very white. The mustache bobbed almost cartoonishly as he spoke. "The name's Rick. Doorman, security, mailman, everything, man. Whatever you need, I'm your guy." This is how I came to know my jailer. "Dan," I said by way of introduction. "Help would be nice." Together we hauled the mattress into the elevator, sandwiching it between us. I always found it quaint that hotels and old apartments kindly omit floor 13 when labeling their halls. The thing is, they can't do a thing to change the architecture itself. Counting from the ground up, I would still be making my home on the veritable 13th floor. I pressed the button for floor 14. 14? Rick gasped. He peered around the mattress to stare at me, his voice low. "You know what they say about floor 14 tenants, don't you?" "No." I rocked onto my back heel, putting some space between us. "What do they say?" Rick barked a laugh. "Absolutely nothing. You thought you were special?" I laughed along because that's what you do when someone's trying to break the ice. I didn't find it very funny. Once we'd gotten the mattress back out of the elevator, I thanked him again and he left me to it. I approached my room alone. The brown tile hallway had a smell to it, sweet and heady. One of my neighbors had an affinity for incense or fragrant cooking, I presumed. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was always there. I would soon discover. The smell never left. I unlocked the door. Inside, the scent was less overpowering. After leaning the mattress against the wall, I took a moment to just sit on the floor of the common room between overturned furniture and stacks of cardboard boxes. I was strangely exhausted. For whatever reason, I stretched out flat on that cool, uncarpeted floor, staring at the ceiling. There was no light fixture. I hadn't noticed that detail in the virtual photo tour. They never tell you anything. I thought about my mother scolding me from the couch when I told her I was leaving for the city. "It's not fair, Daniel," she'd said. "How can I take care of you when you're so far away?" Really, she was the one who needed care more than I did. If anything, I'd felt guilty leaving her behind several states away. But one day I'd taken a walk around our small town, under an overcast sky, looking at those same few strips of concrete and dead grass and empty shop fronts. Realized that it was slowly withering my soul. I had to get out. After unpacking, I was unbelievably tired. As soon as I hit the pillow that evening, I was out like a light. My dreams were strange, full of syringes and bright lights and masked strangers with glassy eyes. In the middle of the night, I was hit with a wave of nausea. My head throbbed. My chest felt as if it were being compressed in a vice. I stumbled to the bathroom and knelt, coughing and retching over the bowl. Something in my throat dislodged itself and slid out of me, smooth and slippery and round. It was an eye. It bobbed there in the water, spinning slowly. My first instinct was to flush it away in horror, but it was so odd, so completely unbelievable, that I found myself fishing it out with a glass from the kitchen and setting it aside on the edge of the tub. I studied it for a moment. Its surface was clean and pearly white aside from a thin strand of muscle, tailing from the place where it would normally attach to the socket. The iris was a beautiful shade of dark brown, almost black, with flecks of amber. Its pupil was wide and empty, staring at nothing. At some point I must have hobbled to bed again, because I woke up on my mattress in the morning. What had jolted me awake was the shrill buzz of my apartment doorbell. It kept going until I dragged myself to the door. Through the peephole, I recognized the thick mustache and shiny eyes of Rick, the everything man. I undid the deadbolt and Rick let himself in. "Morning, Dan," he chirped. He was holding a tray full of styrofoam to-go boxes. He handed me one labeled with my apartment number. "Breakfast," he explained, "courtesy of management." I thanked him. He pushed past me and began poking around at the AC unit. I figured he was just doing a routine inspection, so I let him carry on while I hung back the living room, awkwardly holding my box. I popped it open while I waited. Inside, I found a plastic fork and a large cinnamon roll topped with green sprinkles. I hadn't eaten anything yet. The almost sickly sweet smell of the frosting was intoxicating. Wordlessly, Rick surveyed the kitchen. I heard him open the fridge, which I had not yet stocked. I heard the faucet squeak on, then off again. Seemingly satisfied, he moved on to the bathroom. I heard the shower turn on and off again, then the faucet, and finally the flush of the toilet. By the time he returned, I'd eaten the entire pastry. Rick gave me a once-over like he was inspecting me too. He gave a shiny, straight-toothed grin. "You passed," he said. Something in that smile unsettled me, but I brushed it off. Mostly because I simply did not understand it at the time. In retrospect, I think it was a kind of hunger. Rick left without another word. I heard him whistling down the hall, keys jingling. As I stood contemplating the interaction, my phone rang. I rushed to my desk. I work in tech support. I am rarely required in the office. Most of my work is done from my PC or over the phone. It's not exciting, but it pays well. Plus, I don't have to leave the house unless I want to. For a homebody like me, this was a perk. My client had just joined the call when I heard a scraping sound coming from the bathroom. It was only at this moment that I remembered my midnight illness. Surely what I'd seen had been a bad dream, the byproduct of a nasty bout of food poisoning. The scraping reached my ears once more. Then a crash. I politely put my client on hold and ran to the bathroom. The glass cup had slipped off the tub and shattered. I knelt down to pick up the glass, dreading what else I'd find lying on the tiles. There it was, staring up at me from among the shards. An eyeball. The pastry churned in my stomach, threatening to come up. I gagged. That thing had come from inside of me. Was this a sort of rare health condition? I combed my mind for any sort of explanation and came up short. Logic was running thin. The fact remained. Something very foreign had taken place within my own body. The eye writhed like a tadpole. I panicked. I grabbed a dustpan and swept it and the glass into the trash without ceremony. I sat there for a few seconds considering my options. The thought of it squirming in there, alive of its own accord, was too much to bear. I grabbed a wad of toilet paper and fished the eye out of the can. Through the thin paper, I could feel it wiggling beneath the pads of my fingers, like some kind of mutated roach. I booked it to the kitchen, dropped the vile thing down the drain, and ran the garbage disposal until it had been sufficiently pulped. After that, I ran the water for another minute or two until I was satisfied that any trace of flesh had gone. I sank down against the counter, A cold film of sweat coated my forehead and neck. I didn't know what to do from there. My body felt heavy, tired beyond belief. The thought of leaving the apartment suddenly seemed as impossible as lifting a semi-truck. I canceled my work call and went back to bed. An hour later, I got another call. It was Rick. "Dan the man," he said, peppy as ever. "Come downstairs when you've got a minute. Management wants to see you." The office was nicer than the rest of the building. It was a pristine, freezing cold room in the basement of the complex. The walls were pale green, the floor and ceiling a minimal, tiled white. It felt and smelled like a doctor's office. I sat on a hard, upholstered green chair facing an empty desk. On top of this desk rested a placard labeled "Resident Management" in embossed lettering. Beyond the desk was a wide, opaque white window. As I waited, a shadow appeared behind this window. The person's silhouette was made fuzzy by the tinted glass. A smooth feminine voice crackled down from some hidden loudspeaker in the room, speaking my unit number. "That's correct," I said. "Why did you want to see me?" "It has come to our attention that you breached our agreement today." "What do you mean?" The person behind the glass gave an impatient sigh. "When you signed with us, you agreed that no damage would come to the contents of your apartment." I was stunned. "With all due respect, I just moved in yesterday. I've barely had a chance to unpack." The speaker remained silent, so I pressed further. "What damage could I have possibly done?" "All contents must remain undisturbed," the voice said. Emphasis on the all. She sounded more irritated than anything. "This especially includes organic materials. Did you gloss over that paragraph within your lease?" I'm afraid I don't know what you mean." My head spun. Though I hated the implications, they could only be referring to the thing I just disposed of in my kitchen sink. I heard a pen click, then the sound of scribbling on paper. Beneath the window, a slot creaked open. A rubber-gloved hand poked through, shoving a stack of papers onto the desk. "Please review the document," said the voice. "We operate on a 3-strike system here. You are on your first infraction. 2 more, and we will be left with no choice but termination. I have circled the relevant section." I opened my mouth but couldn't find the words. I just took the packet and began to read. It was my lease. Each page contained my initials in the corner, as well as that of the property manager. I located the circled paragraph. "Tenant must not destroy or otherwise inflict damage upon any and all contents of the apartment, including blinds, window panes, countertops, walls, ceilings, or floors, doors, miscellaneous accommodations, and especially organic materials. Organic materials include but are not limited to body of tenant. See tissue, fluid, bone, hair. And additionally, bodily expulsions. Preservation of the apartment ecosystem is of paramount importance to the success of this community and its objective. Failure to comply will be addressed by management on a strike system. Upon the 3rd strike, management reserves the right to terminate the offending tenant." This section was new. It had to be. But there were my initials neatly printed in my handwriting. I flipped to the final page to find my full name printed in bold, and my signature scrawled on the line below. "This can't be legal," I said. "I never agreed to this." "You said that you'd say that." Her flat, matter-of-fact tone made my blood boil. "Can you explain what the hell is going on before I get a lawyer?" I said, standing so abruptly that my chair tipped over. She laughed at this. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." A musical chime sounded over the speaker. From a white, nearly invisible door to my left emerged 2 people in pale green hazmat suits. Thick visors shielded their faces from my view, as they grappled my arms with surprising strength. I struggled, screamed in protest. I felt a piercing pain in my neck, and the world was cloaked in cotton. Everything felt light. I was gliding out of the room, being lifted on some kind of dolly. I craned my head to see who was pushing me. A familiar wide grin and wiry mustache slid into view, distorted and alien. "Hey, champ," Rick said. "Let's get you back to your unit." Since that first day, I have been living in a state of total fear and isolation. I don't know what this place is, but I know that it is making me very ill. All the while, they're watching my progress from somewhere beyond those dingy walls. If I follow the rules, things are easier. I don't leave. I get my groceries delivered and take all of my appointments online. I have tried to run. Rick always finds me before I make it through those double doors and out into the sunlight. He is the sentry of this ancient building I have come to despise. He is always smiling, even as he wrestles me to the ground, even as he drags me back to my own unit door with its peeling paint and rusted metal numbers. I don't think he's even human. I've grown accustomed to the smell of the body as it falls apart. It's not just eyes now. Pieces of vertebrae and swatches of sinew clutter my fridge in pitchers and plastic containers. Strange butterfly clusters of ears cling to the lamps and windows in shuddering sheets of flesh. Strips of gums and teeth crawl like inchworms across my countertops. Furthermore, something is wrong with my skin. Every night, I feel it fluttering and pulsing, as if it too wants to replicate exponentially, to multiply, to escape. I'm pretty sure I'm breaking protocol just by writing this account. If anyone finds this, know that I am alive, but I am rotting all the same. I don't know how much longer I have. Last night, an entire hand crawled from my throat. The apartment buzzer just rang. I already know who it is. I'm exhausted. Everything around me feels like it's collapsing. I can't climb these stairs anymore. I've been climbing for so long, yet there's no end in sight. My mind is unraveling. I'm writing this in case someone else is facing the same hell I am. It's 7 p.m. when I get home from work. I park my motorbike in the corner, clip my helmet onto it, and collect a parcel from the watchman. As I step toward the lift, the lights flicker and everything goes black. Power cut. All of a sudden, it starts pouring heavily with severe thunderstorms. I guess no lift tonight. I live on the 5th floor. Fine, I think. At least the climb will count as cardio. I start up the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the darkness. Before I began climbing, I saw an old man standing on the road completely drenched. The first flight of stairs felt normal, but as I rounded the landing to the next, the air grew thick and cold. I froze. I saw myself stepping out of the lift with a cardboard box labeled "office stuff." Ringing the doorbell with trembling fingers, I didn't move. I just stared, disbelieving. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a message from the office. Due to recession and rising costs, we regret to inform you that you have been terminated effective tomorrow. I watched the other me collapse against the doorframe as my wife opened it, her face crumpling when she saw the box, the weight of 23 years of service, reduced to a single cardboard container. I deleted the message without reading it twice. My legs felt heavy as I continued climbing, the echo of my wife's disappointing sigh following me up. I quickened my pace, desperate to leave that memory behind, but the next level offered no refuge. The scene shifted violently. Another version of me stormed out of the lift, shouting into his phone. I've tried everything I can. I've applied for every job posting available. I'm a bloody gold medal winner and have done my MBA and IIM, and the irony is, I'm not fit for the job. I'm not fit for the job. I watched myself throw the phone onto the ground. The screen shattered like my composure. My 7-year-old son opened the door, hope lighting up his face. "Papa's home." But I snapped at him, words sharp as broken glass. He ran inside, crying. I watched myself collapse in tears on the cold concrete, head in my hands. From somewhere nearby, I heard a mother berating her child. "Only 95%? What will people think?" The echo bounced off the walls, mixing with my son's muffled sobs from behind the door. I pressed my palms against my ears and climbed higher, but the sounds followed me. The smell of cheap whiskey hit me before I even saw what was next. A drunk version of me stumbled into view on the next landing, laughing with hollow madness as he crashed into walls. The stench filled the narrow corridor, my wife and son rushing out to lift him, her face a map of exhausted worry, his small hands trying to steady a father who'd forgotten how to stand. A dustbin sat nearby, overflowing with torn canvas and broken dreams. Paintings, all signed with my name in careful script. Years of weekend art classes, small exhibitions at local cafes, the quiet hope that maybe, someday, all reduced to garbage. My chest tightened. The talent that once felt like salvation now felt like another failure. I looked away and kept going, but I could still hear my son's confused whisper. "Why did Papa throw away his pictures?" I continued climbing, each step a greater effort than the last. I could hear the screaming before I reached the next floor. The sound hit me first. Screaming, pleading, the desperate echo of a marriage dying. My wife stormed out, suitcase in hand, tears streaming down her face. I chased her, grabbing at her arm, my voice breaking. "Please, just give me one more chance. I'll get better. I promise I'll..." But she slammed the lift door shut, and I was left pounding against cold metal. My son peered out from the doorway, 8 years old now, his eyes wide with the kind of terror that changes children forever. Pills rattled under my shoes. Antidepressants scattered across the floor like failed promises. I couldn't stop. The stairs stretched endlessly upward. I finally reached my own door, the 5th floor. I was met with silence, heavy, suffocating silence. I walked inside and found my son, 9 years old, sitting on the floor and crying. And then I saw myself, hanging, a bedsheet knotted around my neck, tethered to the ceiling fan that used to spin lazy circles on summer afternoons. On the table, a note in my handwriting. "I'm sorry I couldn't be the father you deserved." My hands shook as I pulled a folded sheet of paper from my pocket, this very note I'm writing now, and placed it in front of my son. His tear-stained face looked up, and for a moment, our eyes met to cross impossible time. Then I opened the main door, and I saw it again. The ground floor. A man parking his motorbike, clipping his helmet, collecting a parcel from the watchman. The clock read 7 p.m. It began to rain heavily with severe thunderstorms. I saw a middle-aged man go near the lift and then walk towards the stairs. Before he began his climb, he looked at me like a strange old man on the street, drenched. The old man looked familiar, as if I saw him somewhere. Something about him reminded me of my son. The town I grew up in was strange. That statement typically garners a fair bit of narrative intrigue when I say it in person, but peculiar childhoods seem to be alarmingly common among the contributors that skulk about this particular forum. So allow me to be more specific. My hometown was professionally strange. 5.5 square miles of humble farmland that doubled as a hotbed for the unexplainable and the uncanny. Strangeness was our lifeblood, the beating heart of our economy, attracting tourists from 3 states over with rumors of the closely kept secrets lurking within our one-of-a-kind showroom, an orphanage for the enigmatically aberrant that was simply titled Curbside Emporium. That strangeness used to be the love of my life. Now I'm starting to suspect it'll be my tomb. But hey, it isn't all bad news. At least I'll finally be a part of it. That is what I wanted, right? The way my parents tell the story, Curbside Emporium was my first true passion. Something that really put life behind my eyes. To borrow a lovingly dumb expression from my dad, the mystique of the various oddities seemingly bonked my consciousness into second gear. Makes it sound like I was an exceptionally dull toddler before that day, glazed over and fashionably disinterested, until I glimpsed Miss Sapphire, the world's only sparkling blue tapeworm, and then, voila, I was awakened. Not to veer too far off track, but have you ever heard of the Mutter Museum? It's a lovely little gallery nestled in a quaint section of Philadelphia's downtown, collecting and curating a wonderful assortment of oddities. The lady whose body turned to soap, the world's largest colon, a plaster cast of 2 conjoined twins. Curbside Emporium, and by extension my hometown, are certainly comparable. The amount of strange things stuffed within a single location, the raw density of it all, inspired a deep thrum of nostalgia within me when I visited the Mutter Museum for my cousin's wedding a few months back. Yes, you can in fact get married there. Why in God's name would you want to? Well, if it reminded me of home, it must have reminded my cousin and his high school sweetheart of home too. And that's probably as good a reason as any to select a venue. Plus, Curbside Emporium doesn't have a reception hall. There's one key difference between the two, however. The Mutter Museum imports its strangeness from all over the globe. My hometown? We've never had a need to outsource like that. Strangeness springs up around us like weeds, whether we like it or not. Let's put it this way. Whatever cosmic radiation stirs within the waters of the Bermuda Triangle, the same radiation seems to stir within the soil of our small, podunk stretch of land. Assuming you believe the anomalous exhibitions aren't a series of well-intentioned hoaxes, of course. As a kid, that thought never crossed my mind. It felt like a lie too cruel to even exist. Family and friends quickly learned that disbelief was akin to blasphemy in my eyes. My parents sidestepped many a screaming match between my older sister and me by prophylactically outlawing Curbside Emporium talk at the dinner table. Begrudgingly, I complied, as long as she didn't disparage those consecrated halls. Then I wouldn't argue she had crap for brains. Tit for tat. To be clear though, she was right to be skeptical. First off, the unassuming layout and hokey decor didn't exactly scream scientific integrity. It was the second tallest building in town, squeezed tightly between the fire station and our local burger joint, marked by a piece of ostentatious neon signage that rose unnecessarily high into the air. I loved pretty much everything about Curbside Emporium. Excluding that sign, it made no earthly sense. The nearest interstate was 10 miles away, and the tallest building in town was the adjacent fire station. Who was the elevation for? Birds? Angels? Distracted, low-flying biplane pilots. Not only that, but the fluorescent green bulbs cost a small fortune and were prone to malfunction. For them all to work at once was nothing short of a miracle. The first R burnt out for what seemed like my entire freshman year of high school, making the sign read Cubside Emporium, which, to be perfectly frank, just sounds like a very odd, very specific porn outlet. Now, I get it was meant to be symbolic, not practical. A signal to visitors that Curbside Emporium was clearly the crown jewel of our otherwise no-name town. Still, the building itself was in a state of perpetual disrepair. Why not siphon money from the sign towards fixing the crumbling foundation of eradicating the carpenter worm larva that chewed up the floorboards every winter? But I digress. Disrepair didn't dampen the magic. Not for me, anyway. Walking through those oversized double doors, those towering slabs of dark oak that divided the dullness of the real world from the brilliant shimmer of dreamlike possibility, never failed to lift my spirits. The lobby set the tone for the showroom to come, with a palpable air of mystery and an abundance of kitschy charm. Shadows flickered in the dim lighting provided by scattered, gold-plated oil lamps and a centrally hung electric candelabra, with telescoping rows of gold teeth that glowed above the swaths of eager patrons. The color scheme leaned heavily on deep reds and dull golds, which made the room look simultaneously regal and cheap. A burgundy-colored carpet that could easily hide a spilled glass of Mariette, or a bloodstain within its fibers. Gold tassels on the curtains separating the lobby from the showroom that matched the gold threads, embroidered into the curtain itself. Unlabeled knickknacks devoured every inch of wall space. At first glance, the ornamentation could appear chaotic. The more you looked, however, the more it seemed to fit together like pieces to a puzzle, implying some perverse method to the madness. Feathers dangled off the rim of a dream catcher to fill the U-shaped emptiness framed by the antlers of a taxidermy deer's head below. The borders of scenic painting fit snugly between the legs of an antique artisan's bench, which the owners had bolted upright, extending literally from the wall behind where Mr. Baker operated the ticket counter. Mr. Baker, to my knowledge, is the only confirmed employee of Curbside Emporium, a gaunt, joyless corpse of a man, always sporting a black tuxedo, an off-white button-down, and a golden cummerbund. Tickets cost at least $10, although you're technically permitted, and subtly encouraged, to give over 10. As long as that amount is an even number, Mr. Baker won't accept odd-numbered donations. Most people pay 10 on the dot, but I've seen bills as large as 100 deposited into the enormous gold cash register by Mr. Baker's skeletal, liver-spotted hands. Why would you pay over 10? Well, the simple answer is that it's good karma to support local business. There are more convoluted answers, of course. Baseless conspiracies spurred on by the message written in gold lettering above the curtain that leads to the showroom. The more of yourself that you give, the more of yourself that you'll see. Once you push through the thick crimson fabric and enter the cavernous showroom, the Gilded Age aesthetic disappears completely. Instead, the presentation is very plain and down to brass tacks, with wood panel flooring, eggshell-colored walls, and natural light provided through a trio of large windows along the wall furthest from the curtain. To me, this sharp contrast has always felt logical. The lobby establishes mystique via its flamboyant interior design. The showroom, in comparison, needs no crutch. The exhibitions speak for themselves. I've already mentioned my favorite, Miss Sapphire. Don't get me wrong, I'm no tapeworm enthusiast. The creature's bluish, crystalline exterior did little to mitigate the bubbling nausea I experienced when I imagined all 32 inches of it squishing around some poor cow's intestines. No, I was enraptured by the idea of it being one of a kind. That idiosyncratic quality really struck a chord within me. It made the creature seem powerful, and oddly important. There's only one extra long, blue-tinged tapeworm, and hey, you're looking right at it. Bow your head and pay your respects to the first and last of its kind. Not to mention the way they displayed Miss Sapphire's helped romanticize the creature. Its segmented body, held gracefully in the air by lines of nearly invisible string, with a watercolor illustration of a starry night attached to the inside of its glass box, acting as a scenic backdrop, which I think was meant to evoke the image of a traditional Chinese dragon flying over the countryside, rather than a parasite swimming through filth. And that's just a sample. There's the blackened bones of a man and a boy, which, presumably, fell from the sky and landed in our town back in the 80s, although no one actually witnessed a descent. No missing person reports could explain them. No commercial and or private planes were traveling overhead early that morning. A young woman, Erica, discovered the skeletons as she was walking her dog. As dawn broke, she saw them lying side by side on Curbside Emporium's front lawn, holding hands, vacant sockets peering up at the on-scene. Onlookers assumed they were father and son, based on the size difference, their clasped hands, and their narrow hips. Once the sheriff had been sufficiently convinced that they represented something anomalous rather than something acutely murderous, the strange bodies were added to the collection, and since Erica was the first to lay eyes on them, Mr. Baker granted her the distinct honor of naming them. She went with the first thing that came to mind, cheerfully admitting her lack of creativity. Thus she christened the bones Atticus and Finch, having just finished To Kill a Mockingbird for high school English. Of course, Atticus and Jem would have technically been more appropriate, given that the remains were canonically related, a father and his son, but she claimed those names didn't feel right. No one pushed back against the decision. She found them, so the responsibility of naming them was hers and hers alone. That's the rule. You get a plaque engraved with your name posted below the exhibition, too. There's a framed black and white photograph showing a farmer listed simply as Jim, leaning on a downturned pitchfork planted in the ground like a flag, beside a small, circular patch of earth blurred with motion, as if spinning. He named the phenomena flush dirt, on account of the soil's toilet-like churning. Supposedly, his boots sank into it like quicksand when he stumbled upon the anomaly. Only lasted for a day or two before the ground's physical properties spontaneously reverted to normal. There's Philip and his wooden flute that, for a brief time, when played, supposedly emitted noises that sounded like human speech in an unknown language, rather than its normal whistling. More than a little disturbed, Philip happily gifted the instrument to Curbside Emporium, but refused to play along with the tradition, offering no name for the anomaly. According to the mythos, when Mr. Baker prompted him a fourth time, unwilling to take the thing off his hands without a name, Philip replied, "Listen, I don't want to." From then on, the flute became known as "Listen, I Don't Want To," which had an oddly appropriate ring to it, given the backstory. Every bit of it was magic. Every story, every relic, every inch of that place spoke to me. So when I was finally old enough to wander about town without supervision, my mission became clear. I was going to find something anomalous. I was going to have a plaque with my name carved on it. I was going to earn my place in the showroom. In the end, I succeeded in achieving those goals, but only partially. I discovered something wildly inexplicable, a story worthy of Curbside Emporium. I don't believe I'll be getting my plaque, though. Not in the way I imagined it, at least. When I first conceived of my so-called expeditions, they were not such a lonely affair. Sometimes I had more than a dozen kids following my lead, digging holes, overturning rocks, looking towards the sky for the first glimpses of more heaven-rejected bones, hoping to catch wind of an oddity. For them, though, it was a fad, something to be discarded once a new, shinier hobby came along. Years passed and the team shrank. The number of kids I considered friends dwindled into the single digits. By the time I turned 10, it was just me and Riley, and he only came because I was so insistent. Eventually, even Riley had become fed up with the pursuit, but unlike the others, we remained friends, despite our diverging interests. Honestly, my parents were more worried about my social situation than I was. They didn't want to witness their son tread the path of the outcast, consumed by what they considered a fruitless passion. Sure, I missed the banter, missed the sense of belonging too. The rejection was more than a little painful. There was an upside to the solitude, though, something I didn't mention to my parents. If I were the only person on an expedition, that meant I didn't have to share the credit when I inevitably found something. More plaque space for my name, more glory for me. I could tell my fanaticism scared them. It was in the way their faces contorted when I gushed about Curbside Emporium, all shifting eyes and half smiles, like they didn't want to support the hobby, but they didn't want to strike me down either. Unspoken prayers that the fire would go out just as long as they didn't give it any more oxygen. I certainly didn't soothe their concern when I returned from one of my first solo expeditions with a discovery in my backpack, beaming with pride. I can't believe it. I honestly can't believe it, but I think I found something. The first of its kind. Do you have Mr. Baker's number? I need to donate it right away before it gets rotten. I'm going to name him Volcano Bug, I think. The blunt but forceful odor of decay exploded from my backpack as I unzipped it and unveiled my discovery. Reluctantly, I allowed my father to examine the dead critter, holding it upside down by the tip of its tail and spinning it. Enough, Dad, we gotta call him. We gotta call him quick, I pleaded. It wasn't obvious from the specimen alone. The shrill anxiety creeping into my voice likely gave me away. Needless to say, we didn't phone Mr. Baker regarding the salamander corpse perfectly coated in Sharpie ink. Later that evening, when my tears had dried, I admitted to drawing over the creature's scales posthumously, desperate to find an anomaly at any cost. The only thing that saved me from a much more significant punishment was that they believed me, or mostly believed me, when I claimed I hadn't killed the lizard specifically to fuel the lie, which was true, by the way. I'd stumbled upon the body face down, stuck in a small crevice between the sidewalk and the nearby dirt. From there, the scheme crystallized quickly. I feverishly went to work, watching myself scrape the marker over its brittle flesh like my mind was outside my body. Lost within some terrible fugue state, a soul possessed. So when I finally found my anomaly, as opposed to fabricating one, I knew I had to be absolutely, irrevocably sure of its strangeness before I told anyone else, especially my parents. That discovery would come 4 years later. I was trekking along the eastern edge of town, engulfed in the song Zero by the Smashing Pumpkins, blaring from my new wraparound headphones, a gift I'd received for my 14th birthday the week prior. Technically speaking, I shouldn't have been searching there. The strangeness of my hometown did not immunize it from life's harsher realities. We, like many of Pennsylvania's small communities, struggled with heroin abuse, and the poor souls who succumbed to the drug siren call insulated themselves in our town's eastern perimeter, injecting within the safety of its rundown infrastructure. My parents forbade me from wandering around that area, especially since I was alone most of the time. Naturally, I still searched the eastern side of town periodically, ignoring the agreed-upon restriction without a second thought. How could I resist? To know that there was a part of town unexplored, potentially harboring an anomaly, that would have driven me up the wall. I couldn't limit my search. That said, I didn't want them to worry, so I pretended to honor their request. When I found it, it wasn't what I expected. It couldn't be seen, couldn't be heard. No, my beautiful anomaly was something you felt. The air was cool, but it seethed within the hidden electricity of an impending storm. Though the sky was bright and cloudless, the soles of my feet ached from traversing the crumbling sidewalk. With its uneven cracks and jagged slopes, the nearest town was a quarter-mile down the road, an empty ranchero, with mostly boarded-up windows that served as a map marker. Once I reached that dusty ghost of a home, even I knew it was time to turn around. I was gazing up at the sky, that perfectly empty blue abyss, when I felt it. All of a sudden my heartbeat turned rabid. Wild, boundless fear gnawed at the base of my skull. Sweat dripped from my torso by the bucketful, pouring from me at a rate that seemed liable to send me to the hospital. Critically dehydrated, starved kidneys screaming for water. It was all so automatic. I leapt backwards, sneaker catching on a crack in the terrain, nearly causing me to tumble into the broken ground. But first, my mind attempted to catch up with my body, scanning the horizon, eyes hunting for whatever threat had sent my nervous system into manic overdrive. A flock of blackbirds cawed somewhere above me. Wind blustered over my skin, turning my sweat icy. Electricity writhed within the atmosphere, making the hairs on my arm stand at attention. But there was still no visible signs of an imminent storm. No visible signs of anything, actually. The entire scene was motionless, bland and docile. It didn't make sense. It didn't match what I felt. Where was the danger? What in God's name had I just become attuned to? That's when it hit me. Pangs of excitement thumped within my chest. Whatever this is, it could be my anomaly, I thought. So, against my instincts, I crept forward, tiptoed over the weeds springing from the shattered sidewalk slowly, carefully. My fear rose accordingly. Every step inspired another ounce of terror. But, for the life of me, I couldn't determine why. One more step and my hands trembled. 2 more steps and my vision softened, blurring, dimming. 3 more and I'd reached my limit. I physically couldn't force myself further. Once again, I scanned my surroundings. It must be right here. If I can't push myself forward, this is it. It's gotta be right in front of me. I peered down. At first, all I saw was a normal, thoroughly unremarkable square of sidewalk. But that's just it. The concrete was normal, uncracked, clean, no invading shrubbery, no cigarette butts, no brown crystal shards that once formed a beer bottle. It was perfectly normal, so much so that it was distinctly out of place. I squatted down, sat on my haunches, and inspected it closer. Watched the thing like I was waiting for it to flinch, and thus would be required, by the laws of the cosmos, to divulge its arcane secrets. After 10 minutes, my calves started to burn, so I sat down and crossed my legs, still observing the potential anomaly with a retrospectively embarrassing level of intensity, never once letting my eyes wander. Hours passed, the perfect sidewalk refused to flinch, and I still couldn't step on it without experiencing immediate, mind-melting panic. Trust me, I tried. As the sun dipped down, threatening night, I considered leaving, but the story of Jim and his flush dirt flashed through my mind, and I recalled that his phenomena had spontaneously disappeared after a day or so. That fact kept me tightly glued to the ground. I wouldn't allow it to slip through my fingers. The thought of missing my opportunity made me feel decidedly ill. I just needed to figure out what I was looking at, or, at the very least, determine how to document it. As if the universe heard my prayers, a line of black ants emerged from the dirt and began silently traversing the blemish-free concrete, seemingly unbothered by whatever was holding me back. I watched them with bated breath. They started their march at the left-hand corner, closest to me, continuing diagonally across the sidewalk. Suddenly, the one leading the charge pivoted course, although there was nothing blocking their path. The turn was awkward, unnatural. The insect reared on its hind two legs and spun its body 90 degrees to the right, when the ants trailing behind the first reached that same spot. They pivoted too, identically. I sprung to my feet, biting my nails, starstruck by what was transpiring. The strange pivots continued, all sharp and unprompted, each mirrored by the insect that followed. After a few minutes, a black shape began to materialize. This half circle with two stout, pegged protrusions, outlined by the procession of living dots. More soldiers crawled from the grass, and more of the image emerged. Eventually, the last of the line dragged itself from the earth and onto the concrete. To my absolute astonishment, they seemed to have the perfect number of volunteers. When the last ant pivoted, the first was there to connect them all together. The shape was complete. The march stayed strong, and the pivots continued, so the shape never lost its form. An oval with 3 closely clustered pegs on top and 2 more distantly spaced pegs on the bottom. A 5-toed cog twisting within the belly of some divine machine. The whoosh of a passing trunk sundered my hypnosis, and I came crashing back to reality. Just seeing it wouldn't be enough. I needed proof. I bolted towards home. I figured I could spare the few seconds required to keep my parents off my back when I didn't come home that night. I swung open the screen door and screamed. "Staying at Riley's tonight." Didn't stay for their response. Both cars were parked in the driveway. One of them must have heard me. Plus, they'd been pestering me to spend more time with friends anyway. Doubt they would have told me no. As the orange glow of twilight began to dim, I sprinted to Riley's. He was the only person I knew who owned a camera, and the only person who still had a faint, lingering interest in Curbside Emporium. I was confident I could convince him to lie to his parents, tell them he was sleeping at my house. With a seemingly heavy heart, he trudged from his stoop to grab his digital camera, agreeing to accompany me across town in the dead of night. Because of me, he'd never return home. Because of my obsession, he'd never sleep in his own bed again. I used to feel ashamed about my involvement in his disappearance, though as of late, I don't know that I have regrets. Don't know that I have any regrets at all. "A shape made of ants?" Riley asked, voice dripping with sarcasm. Grass crunched beneath our boots. The moonless night provided meager illumination. Still, I could tell Riley was smirking like an idiot. "Listen, it'll make more sense when you see it," I replied, but he cut me off. "Was the shape a middle finger? That would scare me too." I sighed, but threw a sheepish grin. "Wow, yeah, how'd you know?" I chuckled and gave him a gentle push. "Ow, dude, watch it. Collarbone," he remarked theatrically. "God, man, that was 2 years ago. When am I finally going to be let off the hook?" "Never. The fracture may be healed, but my mental scars, Lord have mercy, they ache," he said, adopting a southern twang for the last 2 words. Riley was tall, athletically gifted, and as far as I could tell, fairly handsome. He had all the ingredients to develop social standing. Because of that, I wasn't too surprised when he started phasing himself out of my expeditions. A tiny bit hurt, yes, but not shocked. Riley was a good friend. He wanted to keep me around in spite of my desperately uncool interests. So he browbeat me into attempting some more mainstream hobbies. To that end, his family took me snowboarding in the Poconos one winter. I was a mess on the slopes. crashed into Riley and sent him chest first into the trunk of a tree, turning his collarbone to rubble, shattered the bone into 8 distinct pieces. From then on, we agreed to keep our hobbies separate while remaining friends. Common ground be damned. Maybe if you weren't so menopausal, the bone wouldn't have completely disintegrated. Thing's brittle as heck. I mean, 8 screws, really? You needed 8 screws to hold that toothpick together? He pushed me back, laughing. For a moment, I forgot about everything. Curbside emporium, the relentless pursuit of strangeness to call my own, the ants and the shape in the sidewalk. For once, I wasn't trapped in the endless labyrinth of obsession. I just felt warm, unabashedly, transcendently warm. Which made what Riley said next hurt that much more. Yeah, well, at least I didn't spend all my free time walking around town by myself, searching for make-believe like a loser. Based on his inflection, I don't think he intended the statement to be so pointed. A slip of the tongue. Regardless, the damage was done. I said nothing in response. We were close to our destination. I put my head down and just kept walking. For all his positive traits, Riley had one major flaw. He was stubborn to a fault, and prone to doubling down. Oh, come on, man. Don't be a baby. You have to know that it's fake. No scientist is verifying that crap. Whoever owns the place doesn't let anyone test the stuff. Like a real museum, it's all just, I don't know, smoke and mirrors, sleight of hand. It's a trick. Dejection curdled in my gut like decades-old milk, transforming into the emotion I'd never felt before. Rage. You'll see, I whispered. Then I ran ahead. Out of the grass and onto the sidewalk. We were only a block away. The most vulnerable piece of myself needed to beat him there. Confirm it was real, which would mean that it was all real, and Riley would have no choice but to eat his words. My sneakers squished across the uneven concrete. Crisp night air inflated my lungs by the gulpful. Static electricity sizzled over my exposed skin. As I felt the faintest echoes of fear, I began to slow my pace, sprinting to jogging to just plodding forward while breathing heavy. The fear rose, seething, setting my blood on fire. Eventually, abruptly, I hit an impasse, physically incapable of pressing forward, and there it was. A perfectly normal slab of concrete, a lonely raft adrift in a sea of decay. But there wasn't a single ant to be seen. I felt myself deflate. I could practically hear my confidence hissing like a tea kettle as it leaked through my pores, rising into the night. Never to be seen again. Before I could sink too deep in the mires of self-loathing, something startled me. From about 50 feet away, Riley was shouting, but the message made no sense. Hey, who is that? Quickly, I spun around, did a full 360-degree rotation. There was the boarded-up house at the end of the road, the field we'd been walking through to arrive at the eastern edge of town, the flickering street lamps, and nothing else. Not a soul to be seen anywhere. Are you all right? He bellowed. Seriously, who is that, standing behind you? A little delirious, I shrugged, chuckled, cupped my hands over my mouth and shouted back at him. Genuinely. I paused for a moment, panting. I have no idea what you're talking about. He started barreling towards me, shoulders angled like a quarterback. All I really felt in that moment was disorientation. That changed once Riley was close enough that I could appreciate his expression under the sickly glow of the street lamps. His eyes were wide. His skin had turned table salt white. The muscles in his face looked taut, almost spastic. Riley was terrified. Moreover, he could see something. Someone on the sidewalk behind me. Someone who made him worry for my safety. Someone who looked dangerous. Right as it all began sinking in, there was a shift in Riley's demeanor. In the blink of an eye, he'd stopped charging, sprinting with abandon one moment, walking gingerly the next. His panic disappeared, leaving his face unsettlingly blank. My head swiveled between the perfect sidewalk and my friend, side to side, back and forth, trying to understand what he was witnessing and what it was doing to him. He was about to pass right by me when I put my hand on his breastbone and held him there. His heart rate was slow, downright languid, but it was incredibly forceful. Each beat practically detonated inside his chest, pulses reverberating up my arm every few seconds. What's happening, Riley?" I pleaded. His eyes were open, but only slightly. "He's been waiting for me," he stated. Words failed me. Felt like my throat was caving in on itself. "The five-toed man says it's my time." I kept my hand on his chest, clasped his wrist in my other hand, and gently began tugging him away. "Riley, this was a mistake. We need to go." Briefly, it seemed like I was making headway, although his eyes remained fixed on that perfect bit of sidewalk. His legs were moving with mine, away from whatever was luring him closer. Then I heard the last thing he ever said to me. "Don't worry. It'll be your time soon enough." He gripped his digital camera tightly, like it was a stone, and in one smooth motion, sent it crashing into my head. I collapsed, falling from the sidewalk onto the road, groaning, vision swimming. Sticky warmth trickled down my temple. When my eyes focused, all I could see was the night sky, moonless and grim. Riley grabbed my hands and dragged me off the street back onto the sidewalk, laying me at the foot of the anomaly, the five-toed man, like an offering. The word "wait" quietly spilled from my lips, but it fell on deaf ears. I saw the silhouette of my best friend arc the blood-stained camera over his shoulder. I didn't feel an impact. The world just faded away. When I came to, it was morning. The woman who owned our town's pharmacy was kneeling beside me, asking what happened, asking if I was all right. Her truck idling nearby. Memories of the night before trickled in painfully, a cheese grater rubbing against my concussed brain. "Where's Riley?" I muttered. Before the ambulance arrived, I was able to get myself upright. I stumbled to where I thought that perfect bit of sidewalk was, but to my horror there was nothing. All the concrete was equally dilapidated. Whatever had been there before was gone. Later that week, I found myself in a police station being interrogated about Riley's disappearance. "What drugs were you on?" I stared at the officer, eyes wide with disbelief. "We weren't on anything. I haven't even had beer before, let alone drugs." He clicked his tongue and shook his head. "Really? Y'all were sober? Sober on the east side, taking pictures of yourself in the middle of the night?" My heart fell into my stomach like an anvil. "What do you mean pictures?" He pulled 4 high-quality printouts from a manila envelope and threw them in front of me. They were all almost identical. We were standing on the sidewalk, arms around each other's shoulders, looking into the lens, only visible from the waist up due to the way the shots were angled. Looking at the empty air above our shoulders made me squirm. In each picture, Riley's face was concealed behind what appeared to be motion blur. My face, on the other hand, was cleanly visible. I was smiling, blood streaks glinting against the camera's flash. Who could take thousands of pictures like these sober? I, my voice trailed off. Finally, he asked the question that's plagued my broken psyche for decades. "Who's behind the camera taking the photos? Who else was with you that night?" To the officer's frustration, to my parents' utter disappointment, and to Riley's parents' absolute indignation, I didn't have an answer. I didn't have a name to give. I still don't. So I said nothing. Riley was pronounced legally dead 2 years later. The town assumed he got caught up in the drug trade somehow, kidnapped and killed because he owed the wrong person money. I knew that wasn't true, but I couldn't provide a better truth, so that became his story. But I think I found that better truth. It was inside Curbside Emporium all along. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I attended my cousin's wedding in Philadelphia a few months back. I hadn't planned on attending. As soon as I turned 18, I left Pennsylvania with no intention of returning. Out of the blue, though, my cousin called me, practically begged me to attend, claiming the family missed me, so I relented. Sure didn't feel like they missed me at the wedding, though. Everyone leering in my direction with that all-too-familiar look of thinly veiled disgust. Even my cousin seemed surprised to see me, which was a little bizarre. Only got more bizarre when I thanked him for convincing me to come at the reception. He denied ever calling me in the first place. From there, though, it was already too late. The seal was broken. My trajectory felt inevitable, no matter how much I wanted to resist. Yesterday I handed Mr. Baker a $100 bill, pulled back the curtain and walked into the showroom. It wasn't so bad, not nearly as bad as I imagined it would be. I guess, in fact, the nostalgia was sort of sedating. Took my time wandering around. It was all exactly as I left it. I even grinned when I passed by Miss Sapphire. Eventually I found myself in front of Atticus and Finch, those blackened, anomalous bones that seemingly fell from the sky in the 80s. It was never my favorite exhibit, so I had no intention of lingering, but a faint shimmer caught my eye. I tried to ignore it, but I still ended up standing in front of the glass, squinting at the shimmer. Don't know how long I just stood there, eyes glazed over and catatonic. I'd never noticed the shimmer before. It certainly couldn't have been new. How could I never have noticed it before? I rubbed my eyes, mashed them around in their sockets until their soft jelly hurt. Even slapped myself across the face once. No matter what I did, though, the shimmer didn't change. The light was reflecting off something buried in Finch, the smaller of the pair, a gleaming drop of silver jutting slightly from his collarbone. There was no denying it. It was a screw. My neck creaked forward. I was standing in such a way that my reflection overlapped with the other, larger skeleton, Atticus. We seemed to be a perfect fit. I haven't slept since. I know that I'll return to the east side of town. Eventually I will, because it feels like it's about my time. The five-toed man is going to make something out of me, something important. I never got my name on a plaque, but I suppose in a way this is better. Honestly, I'm just happy to know that I'll be with Riley again. We'll fall through the atmosphere, together, land in front of Curbside Emporium, together, and maybe if I'm lucky, if Riley's forgiven me, we'll look up into the sky together, and I'll feel that perfect warmth again. Last year, my friends and I decided to do a 3-day hike on the Washita Trail. Ben, Sean, and I had done multi-day hikes together on different parts of the roughly 210-mile trail before, and were hoping to knock out another section before the summer was over. The section we decided to hike this time had a public camping area at the base of the trailhead that led to the Washita Trail proper, which we had decided to take advantage of. We had parked Ben's car at the ranger station near our endpoint and carpooled in mind to the camp. When we arrived, the sun had started to set, but the place was bustling. Kids were riding bikes around the footpath and families were sitting around grills, enjoying the scenery. Places like this weren't really my cup of tea. I preferred more secluded, quiet areas to set up camp. But something about the communal atmosphere gave rise to a sense of nostalgia for the times my family took me camping at places like this. By the time we set up our tents, night had fallen. and the crackling of dozens of campfires filled the air. We ate a quick supper of roasted hot dogs and a few beers before heading to bed. The next morning, I awoke to distant shouts echoing through the campsite. I sat up onto my elbows and listened, trying to make out what was being said. Before I could determine what was being yelled, I was startled by a quick slapping at the front of my tent. Worming my way out of my sleeping bag, I unzipped my tent flap and poked my head outside, shivering at the cold morning air. I saw Ben and Sean in front of their tents, pulling out their hiking boots. "Get your clothes on, man," Ben said as he saw me. "What's going on?" "A kid's missing. Probably wandered off last night," answered Sean, cinching his bootlaces tight and standing up. I turned back into the tent and started getting dressed. My heart sank as I heard the shouts become more abundant as more campers joined in on calling out the child's name. "Sarah! Sarah! Sarah!" I hoped that she was just in the shower room or had woken up early to go to the playground nearby, but I couldn't help but think of the countless stories I'd heard of kids being abducted or disappearing into the woods, only for their bodies to be found miles away, or not at all. Ben and Sean were already a few campsites down from ours and calling out to the wood line when I came out of my tent. I hurriedly tied my boots and joined them. "Do we know what she looks like?" I asked. "Brown-haired, blue-eyed, 8-year-old girl named Sarah," came a voice from behind us. I turned to see a college-aged guy walking towards us ahead of another guy and a girl, who were around the same age and wearing packs. "Any idea which way she went?" Sean asked. "No. Her dad said she was asleep in her tent when she went to bed around 11 last night, and was gone when they woke up about 30 minutes ago. Said her shoes and flashlight were missing." "I'm guessing they've already checked the bathrooms?" I asked, looking towards the brick structure at the center of the campground. "Yeah, we checked," said the girl. "No luck." "Listen, we're going to head to the trailhead to look while the rangers get the main search organized. I asked them and they gave us the go-ahead. Do you guys want to help out?" the first guy asked. "For sure," Ben said, looking to me and Sean as we nodded in agreement. "We'll grab our packs and meet you there in 5. We made it back to our site and threw some essentials in our packs. I realized that I had left my water bottle in my car, but Sean, being the prepper that he is, gave me a spare. Once packed, we strapped on our packs and headed towards the trailhead, leaving our camp set up since it was clear our trip had been delayed. The shouts had tapered off as people began to gather around a park ranger at the center of the camp area. Walking towards the trailhead, we heard sobs coming from a campsite just off the path. A park ranger was sitting beside a woman, who could only be Sarah's mother, crying into a pink pillow in the shape of a unicorn, while a deputy stood attempting to speak to the girl's frantic father. We glanced at each other as we moved past the heartbreaking scene. The expressions on each of our faces were of sorrow-tinted determination. James, Kristen, and Paul were the names of our new companions. They were each outdoorsy types like we were, and were just as well equipped. We met at the trailhead just outside of the camp area, and gathered around the large wooden map, and formulated a plan. There were several off-shooting trails which snaked through the valley. Main Street was the 8-mile circular trail, which returned to the trailhead and connected to the Washita Trail at the top. Baker's Falls was a cutback trail which led to a waterfall 4 miles from the trailhead, and Vista Trail led up the mountain 5 miles to the north. We decided that it would be best to split into groups of 2 in order to hit each trail while staying as safe as possible. Paul and Kristen volunteered to take the Vista Trail. Sean and James decided to take Baker's Falls, leaving Ben and I to take Main Street. It was agreed that we would meet at the trailhead in 7 hours, giving us time to be thorough with our searches, and be back before nightfall. We knew cell service would be spotty, if not altogether non-existent, but we exchanged numbers on the off chance we needed to contact each other, and ensured we each had the ranger's station numbers. When we set off, Paul and Kristen headed north at the split and began their arduous trek up the side of the mountain, while the rest of us hiked east towards Baker Falls. We didn't talk much, aside from occasionally calling out for Sarah. We were afraid that by making too much noise, we might miss hearing her, and didn't want to distract each other and miss any sign of her. Just before noon, we arrived at the split for Baker's Falls. Sean and James headed down the mountain, while Ben and I continued on Main Street. It was a nice day given the circumstances. If it were any other time, I would have been greatly enjoying myself, taking in the cool air and absorbing the majestic scenery, but for obvious reasons, I didn't pay any of that much mind. After a while, James and Sean's echoing calls faded away as we made our way towards the intersection with the main trail. We took our time, listening intently between each call-out. The trail began to turn north up the mountain, and at a sharper angle, slowing us down quite a bit. It was fairly taxing, and I found myself calling out less as I began to run out of breath. It had been a while since I had last hiked with a pack. I noticed Ben starting to struggle as well, so I suggested we take a break. After all, we had been going non-stop for several miles at this point. We found a shaded spot next to an outcropping of rocks just off of the trail, took off our packs, and pulled out some snacks. We sat silently eating and listening between deafening bites of granola. At first it sounded like a bird. In the distance behind us, a ways off the trail, I heard a shrill cry. I stopped chewing and tapped Ben. "Listen, you hear that?" After a moment it echoed again, a muffled cry that was almost certainly that of a child. We both jumped to our feet and called out, "Sarah?" The cry responded, "She's up there." Ben cried as we both made our way around the outcropping, leaving our packs where they sat. "Sarah, keep making noise. We're coming," I yelled. The cries became clearer as we trudged our way up the mountain off the trail, slipping on loose rocks and sticks. We were getting close. Ahead of us, we saw what appeared to be an opening on a small plateau through the trees. The vegetation began to thin out, and the ground became saturated with flat, rough, gray stones, which were much different than those that we had seen so far. As we made our way to the opening, it became evident that the crying was that of a little girl. The trees gave way to a large glade of gray stones. No trees or plants in sight. "Sarah, where are you?" Ben called, straining to catch his breath. "Down here," a small voice squeaked from somewhere in the glade. In the middle of the opening was a small rise in the stones. Once we were about 15 feet away, I saw that it was the raised lip of a large hole about 7 feet across and blacker than night. A short way down. "Jesus, Sarah, are you in there?" I called down into the abyss. "Yes," she replied through her sobs. Her voice echoed up towards us. She was a long way down. "Are you hurt?" I can't stand up," she cried. "Ben, did you put any rope in your pack before we left?" "No. Did you?" "No." "Sarah, are you bleeding?" "I don't think so," she said weakly. "It's too dangerous to try and climb down there. These rocks could come loose and cave the whole thing in," said Ben, testing the edge of the pit. I pulled my phone from my pocket and unlocked the screen, but found there was no service. Ben did the same and shook his head. "Ben, get back to the trail and get help. I'll stay here with her." "All right, I'll be back," he said before running back into the trees. "Just hang tight, Sarah. We're getting you some help." Silence fell over the glade as Ben's footfalls faded into the distance. "Sarah?" Her sobbing had stopped and several seconds passed before she made another sound. "Please come and get me." Her voice was weak and pleading. "It's really dark in here." I turned my phone light on and held it into the opening. It illuminated a few feet down, but no further. I still couldn't see her. "I promise we're going to get you out. It's not safe to come for you right now. I don't have the tools and I don't want you to get hurt any more than you already are. I knew she must have been scared, and I felt horrible that she had to stay in that hole a second longer. I thought about dropping my phone to her for light or to play a game, but it might break and be of no use to either of us. I thought about my pack and hated myself for leaving it at the trail. I had a headlamp in the front pocket, and some paracord I could lower it down to her with. Sarah, I have a flashlight and some snacks in my backpack on the trail. I'm going to go and... Don't leave me, she screamed. It was a loud, tormented, almost angry scream. Okay, I won't go anywhere. Silence returned to the glade. Looking at the opening and the rocks surrounding it, I noticed something odd. The rim of the pit was nearly a perfect circle. It definitely wasn't a natural formation. The rocks appeared almost as though they had been deliberately stacked. Sarah, how did you get in there? I fell. Did you fall from up here, or is there another way in somewhere? There was no response for a moment. I slipped and fell from up there. There was no sign of collapse on any side of the pit. I thought that maybe it was a stable structure after all. I can't climb out. My leg hurts really bad, she groaned. Can you please come down here with me? I'm really scared. I really considered it. Even if the structure was stable enough to hold my weight without collapsing, the hole was too wide for me to brace against the sides, and it would take a skilled rock climber to safely climb down with as small as the cracks and ridges of the walls were. I really wish I could, but it wouldn't be safe for either of us. There was no response. Are you thirsty? I asked, remembering the water bottle I had clipped to my belt. Yes. I unclipped the bottle and held it at the side of the opening. Sarah, can you see me? Uh-huh. Good. I need you to move as far as you can against the wall. I'm going to drop this bottle down to you, okay? Okay. I listened for movement but heard nothing. Sarah, can you move against the wall? I did. I paused for a moment. Sarah, are you sure? This is kind of heavy and I don't... I moved, she screamed. Jesus. All right. I mumbled as I dropped the bottle into the inky blackness. I waited for a thump and a cry or it to clatter against the floor, but no noise came. Did you get it? She didn't respond. Sarah, did you get the water bottle? Still no response. Ah, crap. I knocked her out, I mumbled. Sarah? I got it, she said, breaking the silence. I breathed a sigh of relief. Don't scare me like that, I laughed as I pulled out my phone. Still no service. It had been nearly an hour and a half since Ben left. I did a quick calculation and estimated that it would be at least another hour before he returned with help. I sat next to the edge for a while, letting a sense of relief and accomplishment wash over me. We had done a really good thing here, and I was more than happy to sacrifice a hiking trip to help find this girl. I sat for a while longer, waiting for the sound of the cavalry rushing up the hillside, but was met with a blood-curdling scream from the pit. Sarah, what is it? Peter, there's something in here with me. Another scream. What is it? Sarah, what is it? I don't know. Please come down here. Please, please. Sarah, I'm gonna drop my phone down to you. Use the light and see what it is, okay? She continued screaming. I pulled my boot off and removed my sock, turned the light on my phone, and slid it inside, layering the sock on it for more cushion. I'm dropping the phone. Try and grab it. I yelled over her screams as I let the phone fall. I watched as the dim glow of the light through the sock disappeared into the darkness. A few moments later, the screaming stopped. Sarah, did you get the light? What was it? Again, nothing. Sarah, answer me, please. I got it, she said calmly. Is the light on? I don't see anything. There was a long pause. It broke. Okay, that's fine. But you're all right now? Please come down here, Peter, she said in a whimper. I'm really sorry, but I told you it's not safe. I froze. Sarah? How do you know my name? There was no answer for a while. Answer me, Sarah. How do you know my name? It's on your bottle, silly. She giggled. That's not my bottle. A friend let me borrow it. There was no way she could have known my name. At the very least, my full first name. I didn't think Ben had called me by name in the short time he was there, and even if he did, he calls me Pete. Come down here, she said in a raspy whisper. No. Come down here. I stood and started to back away from the pit. Down here, help, help me. The voice screamed, changing pitches. I stumbled back and fell onto the rocks as I heard what sounded like bones scraping against stone from within the pit. Down here, help, help. The voice no longer resembled that of a child's, no longer that of a human. I stood and ran. I ran as fast as I could down the side of the mountain as unearthly screams bellowed from behind me. I fell again, this time rolling forwards, striking my hip against a stump, sending a wave of dull pain through my body. I stood and ran as best I could to the way I had come. I wasn't sure where I came out on the trail, but I knew which way the trailhead was. I ran until I couldn't hear the screams and kept running until I met a ranger coming up the mountain towards me at a jog. No, don't go up there, I shouted breathlessly. Calm down, you're safe. Are you hurt? He asked. I'll be all right, but you can't go up there. That's not Sarah. I don't... It's all right. Sarah's safe. Your partner's found her halfway up Vista Trail. He took me by the shoulders and started guiding me down the mountain. Where's Ben? Did he make it down? Yeah, Ben and the rest of your crew are down at the campsite waiting for you. Y'all did a good job. Really appreciate your help. We walked for a while before I was able to calm myself. What is that glade up there? That pit? What's in it? He sighed and gave me a quick glance. Nothing that you gotta worry about, he said with an uneasy smile. We made it back to the camping area, and I met up with Ben and Sean, who both understandably had a few questions. However, I didn't have time to answer them since the rangers were shutting down the area and we had to leave. We packed up our things and loaded my car just as they were closing the gates. On the way back to Ben's car, I told them what happened at the glade. Ben said the ranger freaked out when he told him what he had found, and told me to stay at the campsite until he came back with me. Apparently, when Kristen and Paul found Sarah, she told them her mom was calling her from the woods when she went to the bathroom that night, so she followed her voice up the trail but got lost. Sean thinks to this day that we're pulling some wild prank on him, but Ben and I know what we heard, what we saw. I haven't gone hiking since, and I don't think I will for a while.